All right. Let's unpack this. We are diving into one of the most brutal environments in professional sports.
Hmm.
The final tense moments of a Formula One championship battle. Specifically, we're taking a deep dive into McLaren.
Yeah.
We received some source material, a really detailed analysis of their recent strategic missteps, and intense pressure cooker facing their drivers, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri.
And what the sources reveal is fascinating. It's almost paradoxical, you know.
That's what I'm saying.
They say McLaren has built a fantastic car, and the raw speed, I mean, it's undeniably there.
Right.
Yet these recent, very public failures raise serious questions about their readiness, their maturity as a true championship contending team.
Exactly. It's a tension between the machine, which is excellent, and the human execution, which seems to be faltering.
When it matters most.
So our mission today is to cut through the noise and really understand the psychological and strategic burden of this final push. We're going to look at 2 consecutive, just glaring organizational errors they've made.
And then get into the mind of the driver, that psychological tightrope. And ultimately, we're asking you, the listener, what does it truly take beyond just raw speed to become a champion? Let's start with what happens if they fail.
Yeah, let's. Because the sources are remarkably clear that the fallout for McLaren, should they lose the title now, would be catastrophic.
Yeah, that's the word for it.
Right.
They observe that if McLaren fails to close this out, it will be a very hard blow to recover from.
And it's not just about losing one championship.
No, the analysis is stark because it draws this direct contrast with their main competitor, Max.
Right.
The sources explain that if Max loses, nothing happens to his overall legacy. His excellence is already recognized.
They've already proven it.
Exactly. He's a world champion many times over.
Sure, right.
The narrative stays strong. But for McLaren, losing now, it's viewed not just as a missed opportunity, it's a diagnosis of a structural failure.
So it's a failure of reputation, not just results.
Yeah.
It suggests that while they have the best hardware, the team is missing something essential.
Something that championship-winning outfits just have in their DNA. And the sources introduce this fantastic concept to explain it.
The cow.
That's right, callow. It translates literally as callous, but in this context, it means toughness, deep psychological resilience, or what we might call accumulated corrosion.
I like that.
That hard-won, often painful experience that championship teams just possess. It's the ability to execute flawlessly under sustained high-stakes pressure.
And the implications is that McLaren, they've lost that internal capacity they had in previous decades to just fight consistently for the biggest prizes.
But this isn't just a theory, right?
No, not at all. This missing callow is evidenced by a pair of truly glaring, gross errors that happened in consecutive race weekends.
Right, when the pressure ramped up. This is the concrete evidence for that harsh assessment.
So let's detail them, because they reveal different aspects of this organizational immaturity.
Okay, so the first was a technical failure, the disqualification of both cars in Las Vegas.
And this wasn't just some minor penalty.
No, a total exclusion from the results. A technical infringement.
And this is crucial for you to understand. What actually caused it? It was cited as miscalculating the car's height. But how does a modern multi-billion-dollar F1 team miscalculate something so fundamental as ride height?
Well, it points to a process failure, not just a measurement failure. The rules are about how much the plank underneath the car wears down.
So it's not just about how the car sits still, it's about how it behaves on track.
Precisely. The issue in Vegas was likely dynamic. Either the suspension was too soft, causing the car to blam out aggressively on the high-speed sections.
Or they just misread the track itself, the bumps.
Either way, it means the team failed to engineer sufficient rigidity or clearance into a car that was otherwise incredibly fast. It exposed a fundamental technical oversight.
That's a systemic weakness. That's not a bad pit stop. It's an engineering philosophy failure that costs them every single point they earned.
And then the very next race weekend, the second error was entirely different. A pure strategic blunder.
The sources call it a pizia strategica, a huge strategic failure, something they said they hadn't seen at this level for a long time.
And it all comes down to misreading the situation. A delay in calling a crucial pit stop, putting the drivers on the wrong tires at the wrong time. This isn't about car setup. This is about the people on the pit wall.
Their judgment, their confidence.
Yeah. So you have this double-barreled failure, a technical oversight, followed immediately by a strategic failure. And when you put those two distinct types of error together, The sources view it as a critical radiography of the situation.
A fast car, yes, but paired with a race organization that seems to just crumble structurally under championship pressure.
They have the pace, but they lack the callow. That structural immaturity is what puts their entire final push in jeopardy.
And that lack of organizational toughness brings us directly to the ruthless necessity of team alignment in the final race in Abu Dhabi.
Specifically regarding team orders between Norris and Piastri.
Right, because the official line from the team boss, Andrea Stella, is understandable. He says they plan to let both drivers run initially because both are mathematically alive.
Of course he'd say that. You can't start a race weekend telling one driver he's number 2.
But the sources, they just push past all that diplomatic talk and lay out the realistic high-pressure scenario.
Which is, if the race situation solidifies, say, Norris is running P4, still in contention for the title, and Piastri is P2 or P3, not mathematically able to win it himself.
Piastri must yield to Norris.
Must. It's not a suggestion.
Okay, now this is where I want to probe that assertion. The source says this is an automatism, but legally, Piastri doesn't have to move over. What is the tangible mechanism for career ruin here? Would he lose his seat?
It's not about his seat tomorrow. It's about his reputation forever. In F1, reputation is viability. The sources treat this as a zero-sum game for Piastri in that specific scenario.
Because he's not fighting for the ultimate prize at that point.
Exactly. If he's P2 or P3, that doesn't win him the championship. So by refusing to move, he gains no personal glory, but he actively prevents the team and his teammate from achieving the collective goal.
And that collective goal is worth hundreds of millions in prize money, in bonuses, and reputation.
Precisely. And the language the sources use is striking. It highlights the cultural requirement within F1. If Piastri failed to yield in that moment, he would be painted as ridiculous, exposed in F1 forever.
Wow, that's strong.
It is. He'd be permanently scarred as a selfish driver who prioritized a meaningless race position over the team's ultimate success. He would be seen as undermining the very structure that employs him for zero personal reward.
So the refusal would be an ego play that costs the entire organization.
The sources are essentially saying this moment is not up for discussion. It's an automatism dictated by the cold logic of the championship standings. The driver with the mathematically superior chance must be prioritized.
And this connects back to what we were saying earlier.
It does. Because McLaren has already shown its structural weaknesses, that lack of callow, they cannot afford another error of judgment here.
They need total unity, total ruthlessness.
Yes. Piastri becomes the sacrificial certainty to remove the variable of internal rivalry. The conversation might start as open, but if that situation arises, the team will be utterly decisive.
Okay, so let's pivot from the team dynamic to the individual psychological burden, focusing entirely on Lando Norris.
Yeah, because the sources suggest he must be feeling immense pressure, particularly about the crucial race start in Abu Dhabi.
The language used is acojonado, a very strong term, essentially meaning obsessed or even terrified about the prospect of a poor start or worse, an incident.
And that obsession with failure, it directly translates into a specific strategic goal.
Pole position.
Pole position, just to minimize the variables at the start, because a regular start from P2 or P3 places him parallel with other drivers who...
And we have nothing to lose.
Exactly. The midfield runners who might take risks, he simply cannot afford to match.
Yeah.
We saw how that can lead to contact, like in Canada earlier this season.
The start line is where all the psychological pressure of the season just bottlenecks into a 10-second flashpoint.
This is why the sources introduce the analogy of the psychological trap. It's one every high-performance athlete understands, and it's this. The more Norris focuses on avoiding the outcome he fears, repeating in his head, I can't crash, the higher the chance that he will crash.
That seems so counterintuitive. Why does focusing on not doing something make it more likely to happen?
It's about cognitive load and fixation. When you tell your brain to not hit the tree, the brain has to first visualize the tree to process the command.
Ah, okay.
By focusing on the obstacle, you unconsciously steer toward it. Your attention is locked on the negative, which consumes the mental bandwidth you need for precision and awareness. When you're sliding off a road, if you look at the tree, you hit the tree.
So what does looking at the gap mean for a Formula One driver at the start? It's not about avoiding the car next to him.
It's about focusing on the line, the space, the clean air you intend to drive through. For Norris, it means focusing his attention on the corner apex, on the empty strip of asphalt, on listening for the perfect engine note.
He has to replace the visualization of chaos with the visualization of flawless execution.
And the pressure of the moment, compounded by the knowledge of those previous team failures we talked about, makes that shift from looking at the tree to looking at the gap incredibly difficult.
And this difference in psychological burden is really the core of the whole weekend, isn't it? The sources summarize the expectation bias beautifully.
They do. Norris, as the title contender, only has things to lose. He carries the weight of a title drought for himself and the team, plus the massive expectation built by that fantastic car.
While Piastri, on the other hand, only has things to gain.
He's already had a phenomenal season. A solid result just builds his reputation further. The pressure dynamic is completely unbalanced.
And the sources confirm the brutality of what happens next. If Norris fails, the judgment will be swift. They say the failure would be considered ridiculous.
Even though that judgment would completely ignore the context of the entire 24-race season, the sheer speed he demonstrated, and the team errors behind the scenes.
It's a reflection of how F1 narratives are built, you know.
It is. You could drive 23 perfect races, but if you fail the final start, that is what sticks. The sources confirm that F1 and, frankly, human nature dictates that we are going to stick with the end.
The final result dictates the narrative, regardless of context.
And that knowledge is the final layer of pressure Norris has to overcome. The fear becoming the subject of that immediate harsh judgment. The challenge isn't just raw driving talent, it's mastering the cognitive response to fear.
So, to wrap this all up, the sources provide this really clear narrative arc for McLaren's season.
They developed phenomenal speed, but that speed outpaced their organizational maturity. The consecutive technical and strategic failures, they expose a lack of callow, that essential championship toughness.
And the final race, therefore, it's more than just a points tally. It becomes a test of team cohesion, where the needs of the collective override individual ego.
For Piastri, yielding, if it comes to that, is career maintenance. It's that automatism required to preserve his standing in the F1 ecosystem.
And for Norris, it's a psychological battle against fear, where fixating on the possibility of failure might just become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And we'll have to remember, regardless of the 24 races that came before, the narrative will be defined entirely by the outcome of Abu Dhabi. The sources confirm the story of the year will stick to the end result, which leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to mull over. If the championship came down to a single decision and the team had already made high-profile, documented strategic errors this season, would you trust your teammate or the team's call with the title on the line? The psychology in this sport is as intense as the G-forces, and the stakes could not be higher. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.